On this week's Vaticano, the Vatican's Academy for Life rebukes Ireland's decision to legalize abortion. Also, a beloved Vietnamese cardinal's cause for sainthood advances. And these homeless are treated to a dinner in the Vatican gardens on the Pope. This priest from Illinois looks back on his long experience in Rome. And finally, we take a look at a new film from Spain that follows seminarians during the Civil War, and Pope Francis' life is presented in a cartoon. All this coming up. On July 12th, Ireland approved a law to allow abortion. The law states that abortion is legal if the mother's life is at risk or if she is at risk of committing suicide, but both are rare cases. Until now, Ireland and Malta were the only nations in the European Union where abortion was completely outlawed in any of its forms and justifications. Monsignor Jacques Sudeau, the scientific director of the Vatican's Academy for Life, blames the European Union for influencing Ireland to cede to pro-abortion lobbies.
I know a little bit of this case because I followed Ireland since quite a long time because Ireland was entering in the European Union, so there was disposition about abortion in the European Union, so there was pressure on Ireland to do something about the law. Second point, well, that was this unfortunate case of this lady. I knew a little bit, I did not know. I was not really aware of the circumstances, but it seems like a very bad thing, bad event. This woman has been lost, and she could have been saved.
This law will still have to pass through several more state organisms to be applied definitively. It came to the fore in the national debate after a 31-year-old Indian woman pregnant 17 weeks went to a Galway hospital complaining of back pain. The doctors who visited her saw that she was miscarrying but refused to abort the fetus. The woman died 4 days later of a blood infection and after a possible misdiagnosis. As a result, pro-abortion lobbies began a campaign to blame the doctors and the nation's laws prohibiting abortion. And this is what led to the law, through which 3 doctors will have to be in unanimous agreement about risk to the life of the mother or suicide risk. But Monsignor Sudeau believes that this will undoubtedly open the door to abuse.
What the thing is, what I am a little bit uncomfortable with this bill, it did introduce some precision, but they are vague. And in this case of diagnosis, as I said, more often than not, you can control the disease, all these kind of classical disease, heart disease, kidney disease, you can control them with modern therapeutics, and so you can go on. Or even if you have a threatening condition, you can push a little bit up to the state of viability and get a birth of a premature baby. Okay, at least you can go to this point. And you are not going to kill the mother, you are not going to kill the baby. If the baby is too premature, he will die, but you have done what you could do. Now, it can happen that those are in these extreme cases, then it's a question of team. Johnny, you are not alone in obstetric and gynecology. You have other doctors. And big decisions, you cannot take them alone. And that's the question. In the law, like it is, as I read it, or paraphrase, I have a feeling that these extreme decisions are left to one decision. One doctor could decide. It's true, it's in very urgency. But generally, we are not in Tamanrasset, we are not in Fulsara, you are in Ireland. So you could have other doctors by your side, and at 3, you make a right judgment. You can do very, very quickly that. You say, we can or we cannot.
Irish Catholics took to the streets of Dublin in protest. They stick by the Church's teaching that abortion is always a crime. Here in Rome, the life of this Vietnamese priest is being celebrated. Few knew Cardinal Cardinal Vantoan during his 13 years in a communist jail. More caught wind of his work when the Vatican hired him as the head of their Justice and Peace Department. Now, as his cause is considered for sainthood, his story is being revived.
Cardinal Vantoan It was a great surprise to hear, even in Ghana, about this cardinal who came from Vietnam. In those years, Cardinal Vantoan worked in Rome for our department. The cardinal really impressed us because normally meditations are held on scripture in the Bible, while for him it was enough for him to share his personal experience, what he had lived, his personal testimony as a priest and shepherd, most of all in the years he was in jail. What really left an impression was how he, in jail, always began his days with the celebration of the Mass. He celebrated with drops of wine in his hands and pieces of the host, because it was very difficult to get these things in jail. He explained to us that some of his friends hid these things in the collar of their shirts, and during their visits they delivered them to him. And that's how he was able to receive the hosts to celebrate the Mass. That's what he did.
Cardinal
Vantoan constantly offered a deep and courageous Christian example, especially in the period when he was ill with cancer, through which he witnessed every day to his love of Jesus Christ, taking up his cross and following the Master. May he serve the Church as a clear and luminous reference point. Today we need credible witnesses, and Cardinal Vantoan was a very clear and strong one.
Vietnamese Catholics certainly haven't forgotten his imprint. Nieces and nephews came from the homeland he left behind for this Thanksgiving Mass. The completion of a comprehensive account of the possible saint's life, called Positio, has brought his case for sainthood to the Vatican. Professor Waldry Hilgeman has been in charge of collecting written proof and testimonies of His Holiness.
As you know, we are going to conclude the first step of the process. We are going to close next Friday at the Vicariate of Rome the diocesan process. So we are closing the first but the fundamental steps, because in this part of the work we have collected all the testimonies and all the documents that we are going to use in the second step, in the second phase, who is called Fase Romana. That's the step in front of the Holy See at the Congregation of Causes of Saints. So that's how we are at this point. In a certain way we can say that he is a martyr of the hope, but for the Church it's not possible to have his beatification as martyr, because he was not physically killed by the event that he suffered. So we are going into an ordinary process. So we need to make a good reconstruction of his life and his virtue. And so we need to follow that way. It's a little bit longer, but it's not impossible. We have already got some advertents from several countries around the world where are some miracles. So after the closing of this first process in the Diocese of Rome, we are going to study those cases with some doctors and see how to move and to take in consideration those miracles.
And that's why many Catholics worldwide are now praying for the intercession of a man who could one day be known as Saint Vantoan. Thanks for watching. After the break, we'll go to the Vatican Gardens for a special dinner offered by the Pope. Welcome back. You're watching Vaticano. Pope Francis treated 200 guests to dinner in the Vatican Gardens earlier this month. Cardinal Giuseppe Bertello opened the doors of the Vatican to these men and women on his behalf, offering the trappings of home to those who have none.
La semplicità, come Cardinal Bertello serviva a tavola, eccetera.
I remember the simplicity with which Cardinal Bertello served the tables. Some asked him, "Are you really a cardinal?" And he smiled and said yes. There was a real conversation between them. They were all people with enormous dignity.
Man mano vedere quello che ci possono essere, e tutte persone che hanno una grandissima dignità.
The extraordinary evening was organized in the square near the replica of Lourdes Grotto. Members of a papal charity called St. Peter's Circle prepared and served dinner for these homeless who live in Rome.
Di una grande serenità,
You can still see the happiness in the faces of those who took part, although I wasn't thrilled about them being photographed. They were fine with it and were very serene and content. It was a very successful evening.
Qualcuno ha detto sì, grossa serenità, appagati, contenti.
The Circle tries to help those in need to live with dignity through soup kitchens, residencies, and material assistance. This particular occasion offered them the possibility to extend hospitality again in the name of the successor of St. Peter, the Pope.
Il Santo Padre, si spera sempre, ma
You always hope the Pope can be there, but even though he wasn't with us physically, I think he was there with us in mind.
era presente con noi col pensiero.
The experience of American Monsignor Richard Soseman in the Eternal City has been collected into a book offering his reflections from Rome. The work brings together essays and observations on the faith, inspired by real experiences.
Well, coming to Rome, I don't have to normally do Sunday sermons anymore, and so I've tried to write short reflections or even essays in different fora that I can and publish. But I was encouraged during the Year for Priest to write a daily essay for a group that was asking people to offer their Lent for priest. And so that's when I got more into the discipline of writing every morning. And so many of these essays were published first there or shared with others and then evolved from there. And so I also published some essays on a cycling website during the Tour de France and in other venues. I was in charge of the cause of Bishop Sheen to see if he might be a saint someday. And so at that time I learned to use whatever media I can to reach people, to reach their hearts, to encourage them to live faith more vibrantly.
Monsignor Soseman was born in Illinois. He says that each moment of our lives marks and gives meaning to who we are today. That's the impression he hopes his book will leave on the reader as a guide to God.
God loves us, and we love Him, and many of us try to be faithful. But we sometimes forget that when we love someone, we want to know them more and more. You know, you don't have a fiancé, a boyfriend and girlfriend just checking in with each other once a month, sending an email. No, they're on the phone all the time or now texting. They're, texting back and forth, especially when they first get to know each other, when they first get engaged or wedding preparation or whatever. They do this because they love each other and they want to know more and more about the person they love. And so in a similar way, we need to, it's better for us, and as we start on the way of perfection, it makes sense to want to know more and more about God. And so God has sent us Jesus. Jesus has established a church. Through church history, there have been so many rich things which help us to get to God in a better way. And so from the saints to liturgy to church history to just practical things from daily life. So it's about knowing and loving and serving God in a closer way and practical steps on how to do that.
The book, now available on Amazon, will be sold in bookstores after August.
Juro por Dios.
Jesus told his disciples, if they persecuted me, they will also persecute you. And this is exactly what happened to this group of young seminarians. They were assassinated for their faith during the Spanish Civil War. In the conflict, they suffered all kinds of offenses and were forced to celebrate Mass and pray in private. They pardoned their killers and died yelling, "Long live Christ the King." To remind the world of the heroic story of their faith, film director Pablo Moreno came up with a film called A Forbidden God. He brought a copy to Pope Francis.
Es un caso extraordinario dentro de la historia del martirio de nuestra
It was an
iglesia.
extraordinary case in the history of the martyrdoms of our church, and it is a unique case and an extremely relevant one in the context of religious persecution during the period of the Spanish Civil War. We're telling a story fundamentally about love. But what love is it? It wasn't important who pulled the trigger. What was important was why 51 young people, each aged about 25 years, gave their lives for an ideal and an understanding of what that ideal is. In the end, everything can be understood from that perspective, from that of love and forgiveness. It was very interesting for us to tell this story from the point of view of forgiveness of neighbor, and most of all, from the coherence of these young people down to the final consequences.
Y sobre todo también la coherencia hasta el último instante.
Me pregunto qué hemos hecho mal.
For this young director, cinema is a very important means of transmitting the faith.
La fe es algo intangible, es algo abstracto. La única forma que tenemos.
Faith is something intangible, something abstract. The only way of transmitting the faith by way of film is recounting the daily facts of absolute devotion. Faith can be told about through cinema with these daily testimonies, spirituality and religious sentiment, which in the end is God. God cannot be expressed with an object or in a single situation. He is expressed with a mixture of actions, personal feelings, and in the end the word is transmitted. That is to say, through action, and in this case the action par excellence is charity.
Con la acción, y la acción es la caridad.
Belé, el obispo.
The actor who plays as one of the bad guys in the movie spoke of what the situation was like back in those times, during the 1930s in Spain.
Era una situación un poco peliaguda en la que
It was a situation that makes your hair stand on end. On the one side were the anarchists who wanted to take power, and in the midst of everything was a strong anti-clerical sentiment. When the war broke out in a place called Barbastro, the war took these 51 seminarians who were escaping that very conflict. They hoped that this place would be the safest, as they were on the fascist side of the lines. But the soldiers changed sides in that city, and they found themselves in the heart of the persecution. Eugenio Sopena, the character I played, was the only one who attempted to be a wall between the seminarians and the anarchists. Everyone wanted them gone.
Un muro ante, bueno, pues imagínate, ¿no? Todo el mundo que quería acabar con ellos, ¿no?
Several representatives from the Vatican were also at the film's opening in Rome. Cardinal Santos Abril y Castelló was actually born in the land of Aragon in Spain, where the martyrs also lived.
Creo que en primer lugar es muy importante el que en el cine haya no solamente.
Firstly, I think it is very important that cinema hasn't got just worldly subjects, but that it also treats religious themes. The religious theme is also very interesting and can offer the spectator reason for reflection, reason to think seriously about what the life of people is. A movie like this one will, without a doubt, cause polemic between younger people and older people, but at the same time it will make them think and it will show them how a religious theme, and above all, a subject as dramatic as that of young martyrs of Barbastro, can be at the same time an extraordinary example for the lives of many people. Thinking that they can live with principles, that they can be faithful, and although it may cost them their lives, it is worth living for something worthwhile.
Pensar que se puede vivir con ideales, que se puede ser fieles a ellos y que aunque cueste la vida, vale la pena vivir por lo que vale la pena vivir.
Porque vivirán para siempre y a nosotros nos comerán los gusanos.
After a brief break, we'll be back with a new initiative to recount the life and the election of Pope Francis. Welcome back. You're watching Vaticano. Inspiration is a key word for this week's World Youth Day in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. 18 saints and blesseds are being offered as examples of holiness this year to encourage participants to deepen their faith. Patron saints include Our Lady of the Immaculate Conception of Aparecida. She is the protectress of the church and of families, as well as the patroness of Brazil. Then there's also Saint Sebastian, a soldier and martyr for the faith who gave his life out of loyalty to Christ. Saint Anthony of Santana Galvão was a herald of peace and charity who renounced material wealth and became a Franciscan, and a model of self-gift. Saint Thérèse of Lisieux is the patroness of the mission for World Youth Day this year. At 15 years old, she entered a Carmelite monastery where she lived humbly and simply, trusting completely in God. And finally, the fifth patron of the World Youth Day 2013 celebrations is Blessed John Paul II, founder of the World Youth Days and friend of young people. These examples of holiness are being offered to the hundreds of thousands of youths taking part, giving them concrete examples of holiness to illuminate their path. Pope Francis has a special devotion to St. Francis. After all, he did take his name. This year, these Franciscan brothers installed a video camera in the crypt where St. Francis is buried. It can be accessed on the internet 24 hours per day, offering anyone in the world the opportunity to pray at the tomb of this great saint. In just 3 months, the crypt has received 18 million virtual visits. The faithful write their prayers and petitions, and each week the brothers print them and put them at the foot of the tomb. Even Pope Francis wished to send a note. His prayer read, "O Francis of Assisi, intercede for peace in our hearts." The Pope has talked about his choice to take the name. During his first audience with journalists, just days after his election, he explained his devotion to the 13th century, the Saint of Peace.
Alcuni
Some people wanted to know why the Bishop of Rome wished to be called Francis. Some thought of Francis Xavier, Francis de Sales, and also Francis of Assisi. I will tell you the story. During the election, I was seated next to the Archbishop Emeritus of São Paulo and Prefect Emeritus of the Congregation for Clergy, Cardinal Claudio Humes, a good friend. When things were looking dangerous, he encouraged me, and when the votes reached 2/3, there was the usual applause, because the Pope had been elected. And he gave me a hug and a kiss and said, "Don't forget the poor." And those words came to me, the poor, the poor. Then right away, thinking of the poor, I thought of Francis of Assisi. Then I thought of all the wars, as the votes were still being counted till the end. Francis is also the man of peace. That is how the name came into my heart, Francis of Assisi. For me, he is the man of poverty, the man of peace, the man who loves and protects creation. These days, we do not have a very good relationship with creation, do we? He is the man who gives us this spirit of peace, the poor man. How I would like a church which is poor and for the poor. Afterwards, people were joking with me, but you should call yourself Hadrian, because Hadrian VI was the reformer. We need a reform. And someone else said to me, no, your name should be Clement. But why? Clement XV. Thus you pay back Clement XIV, who suppressed the Society of Jesus. These were jokes.
Clemente XV, così ti vindichi contro Clemente XIV, che ha suppresso la Compagnia di Gesù. Sono battute.
The Lord has blessed us with a new Holy Father. But who is he? Where does he come from? What's he like? Jorge Mario Bergoglio. He was born in Buenos Aires, Argentina on December 17, 1936.
No Pope Francis. That's the title of this original cartoon production from CatholicLink.com. In just 4 minutes, these animated characters recount the life of Jorge Bergoglio. It begins from his birth into a numerous family to his election as St. Peter's successor. The project was created to help Catholics and non-Catholics to get to know the Argentinian Pope just a little bit better.
And after years of study and prayer, he was ordained.
And as far as the project goes, the idea of the video called Meet Pope Francis in 4 Minutes was, well, we were there in St. Peter's Square when Pope Francis came out. And I think both Mauricio and I, from the beginning, wanted to do something to help people to get to know Pope Francis, because as he said, he kind of comes from the end of the world, or I don't know. And not a lot of people know what it means to be from Argentina, or maybe the history of Argentina, especially in non-European countries. So we wanted to make a video, and we said this is a way that we can help, and as youth and with our gifts and with our resources, we can find people that will help us. And there was a key guy that helped us to make the video, which is Cardinal Vantoan, who's from Ecuador, and he was the guy that does the drawings and the animation. And working together, I ended up writing the script. Mauricio helped me to kind of polish some of the edges, and then little by little, the project started to advance, and it turned out really well. And after seeing kind of the final result of the video itself, we decided that we had to share it with more people. And we wanted to share it with as many Catholics as non-Catholics as we could. The video about Pope Francis has been kind of a first step, and kind of see what we were able to do and what type of reception that it would have. And it's had an excellent reception, and many people have thanked us and have kind of asked if we would be able to do something more. So I'm sure we're going to continue to do things. I'm not exactly sure what we'll be able to do.
Accompanying them in their daily tasks. And finally, if you think that's a lot, just a short time ago, Christ asked of Jorge one more big step of faith: that he become his vicar on earth, that he give his life in service to the universal church as the Holy Father.
Catholic Link is a multimedia initiative of a group of Catholic university students. They really believe the church possesses a great wealth that must be shared with the world.
Catholic Link is a page that was launched a year and a half, 2 years ago. It was first launched in Spanish. And seeing the potential that it had and kind of the importance and the way it was responding to the needs of many Catholics, I decided to launch the page about a year ago. So together with the founder of the page, his name is Mauricio Artieda, who's a Peruvian, we are trying to offer Catholics audio, visual, and audio materials to help them to evangelize and to explain and to share their faith. We saw and we continue to see a need for simple, appealing, and high-quality videos that can help people to speak, whether it be in a conference or like in a small group or all sorts of situations, or whether it be just sharing also on their social networks like Facebook and these kind of things, to increase the Catholic presence, the presence of a Catholic message in a creative and appealing way. So that's the idea of the page, is that, and it's grown it's been really impressive in the way that it's grown. And at this point, it's in addition to Mauricio and myself, and there's also another guy, Daniel, who's with the movement as well, that's been with us since the beginning. There's been a group from different movements of the church, from different countries. There's people from the Philippines, people from Spain, people from Mexico, people from Argentina and other countries that are helping us on a day-to-day basis, whether it be on Facebook, whether it be on the page, suggesting videos, writing posts. It's really become kind of like an international project.
After the incredible success of this production, Catholic Link members hope that this is just the beginning of many others in service of the Church and in her message.